Hello everyone, my name is Gideon Besonat and I am an application engineer for Micrographics. In the part 2 video of utilizing iFeatures, we're going to have a look at how we can create parameters and set up parameters that we can include in our iFeatures. In the first video, we just went through the basics of iFeatures and how we can utilize iFeatures to just generate the normal profile of the specific iFeature that we are creating. I still have the same profile available, but I have not set up any parameters. Now, setting up parameters from the start is always a good thing. When you create your iFeatures, that parameters can pull through and you can set different limits and specifications as required, for instance. Now let's have a look at our drawing and see how we are going to add parameters. Now this would be a specific distance from a point there. I'm not too worried. Let's say this I'm going to change and give it a parameter. I'm gonna say key 1 underscore, let's call that length, and I'm going to give it a value of 12. I'm going to give this a specific parameter. I'm going to call this Q1. I'm going to say width equals 6, and the parameter would be created. Here I'm going to call this angle key 2 equals, just to give it a parameter. And this I'm going to just say, for instance, key 2 underscore width, and say 15. Calling this distance key 2 equals 10, for instance. Just a few parameters that I'm creating. And when we go to our parameters, we'll see the different parameters that has been created. Now this is quite a big advantage when you have parameters set already within the environment and changes that you would like to make with the specific feature that you're exporting and importing into different models, for instance. Now, depending on your geometry and what you are creating an iFeature from. Now, with this one, I know the width and the thickness, everything can be adjusted because it is a slot, for instance. And that is why I just created a normal few parameters. Now the same steps as part 1, I'm going to extract the iFeature. I'm going to select both the features, and now we can see that here we've got in our size parameters, we've got the parameters that pull through. So if I'm just going to open this a little bit more, and now we can see we've got the distance key. As we remember, that would be the normal key distance from there to the origin point, for instance. Now that is a parameter I'm not worried about, or you can set different limits as required and for your values as well. So key 2, the width, you can choose if you want to put in a range or a specific list. Now in this instance I'm going to make a range. Now I want it to be, let's say, 8 millimeters, and 15 would be the middle ground, and let's say bigger and equal. Let's say this smaller and equal, and let's make this 20 millimeters for instance. I'm going to say okay, and now we've got a different parameter and a range that we can create. With the angle, I also want to specify a list, not a range. I'm going to add 3 different angles here, for instance. And say OK. And now we've got a list for parameters that we can include and choose from when we insert these eye features into different drawings. Now key 1, the length. For instance, you can choose a range, a list. For instance, I'm going to choose a list again. Let's say 12, 15, and 22. Just to make it a bit fun. Now, there's quite a few other parameters that also have been created. You can also choose if there's a list, a range, or none. Now, in this instance, I created a few options so that you guys can have a look and see how this would affect the feature. I'm going to press save. I'm going back to the desktop. Go to my features, and I'm just going to overwrite that specific feature and say yes. Now in this, I've got a different part. As you guys do remember, it's exactly the same part. I can go to the Manage tab and insert the eye feature. I can select that specific eye feature that I've created. I can select the plane. If I want to change the angle, I can go to Next. And now here you can see there's a distance value. So if I'm going to choose that value, let's say 20, because it falls within range, you can set your different key width. So let's say I'm going to make that 20 as well. That angle, because there was a specific list, I can choose the different angles I would like to have. Let's say 55 degrees. Here I've also got a list, so I'm going to include that, make that 15. I'm going to leave that as 6. I'm going to say next. And you can choose if you want to activate the sketch immediately. In this instance, I'm just going to say finish, and you'll see that those specific parameters that have been created within the range or within the list would be placed. Now, when you create a range, for instance, and you select an option that is outside of that range, you'll get an error message telling you, listen, this is not within the range, please fix this or choose a different option. Now, if I go to my normal standard sheet metal part, I can go to the Manage tab, insert the eye feature, and going to choose next. And now I'm going to say, let's say 50 for distance 2. Let's say 50. As you can see, the minimum value is 8 and the maximum value is 20. That is the error I was referring to earlier. Because there's an expression, you'll only be able to add those values. So the minimum is 8, maximum is 20. So I know this needs to be between 8 and 20. So let's make this 18, for instance. Or it should be 8 and equal value and equal. So it's almost giving like the range option, like the list option, because I made it equal. You can make it smaller, so then you've got a bigger variety, but this needs to be equal to 8 and the value and 20. So I'm going to change this to 15, leave it as the default, change this to bigger angle, change this list to 22, and say next. I want to edit the sketch and finish. And now there's unsatisfied geometry, and the reason why that occurred is because if I look at some of these sizes, this will not work, as they might be too big or they might be colliding within their geometry at the moment, as we can see. So that's just very important for you guys to remember and to be aware of when you set your parameters, what your end goal is and what you want to achieve at the end. And be careful with your list of parameters so that your feature, when you place it inside, that you do not have too much issues when you want to place it. So I'm just going to say next. And because of the parameters and some of the issues, in this instance when I set it up, it caused issues on the sheet metal, but it did not cause issues on my normal part. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you guys the errors and the issues with the sheet metal environment, if you guys remember in earlier in part 1, there was no issues when I converted it to the sheet metal and place the eye feature. Just keep in mind when you set your parameters that sheet metal also still have its own rules and regulations to follow, and be aware of the specific parameters that you include so that it does not give you the errors in the sheet metal environment. Now this is from the part modeling environment. Now you guys have seen the normal straight easy version of creating eye features in part 1, where you can utilize eye features and create the geometry, and now in part 2 where you can utilize parameters within eye features and place that in your different models or environments. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe and follow for more content.